Folks who've joined us before. Okay, Anjali, I got the sign for the live stream. I think we're up and running.
Okay.
We are good to go.
Okay, give folks just a minute more to get logged in and settled, and then we'll get started. Everyone can hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
All right, that's always a good sign. I see lots of people still in the waiting room, so let's give them just a sec, if y'all don't mind. And if you're in the room with us, if you'll go ahead and mute your microphones, that will help a lot.
Your microphone.
All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening for tonight's virtual event, The Painted Churches of Texas. We're always so happy to see you, and we always invite you to get to know more about us. We are the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission. We are a 501c3 that supports the mission of the Texas Historical Commission and its preservation efforts across the state. Many of you have given us donations through this event or previous events, and we're so grateful for that. Thank you so much for supporting our work. I want to welcome THC commissioners and Friends board members and some of our colleagues that I see in the room with us tonight from the Texas Historical Commission. So good to see you all. We also have a special guest, Mr. Robert Marshall. He has worked on some of the restorations for some of the churches you'll see tonight, and hopefully he'll join us in the Q&A and give us the benefit of his expertise. We're glad to have you here, Robert. I'm Christy Peliquin. I'm the development manager for the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, and I'm joined tonight by our executive director, Anjali Zucchi. If you haven't already followed us on social media, please do. We'd love to connect with you. This is also how you can keep up with the events that we're hosting, like our next event, which is coming up next month, called The Problem of Slavery in Mexican Texas, featuring researcher and distinguished teaching professor Andrew Torgett of University of North Texas. Just a few housekeeping items before we get underway. If you could please keep your microphones on mute, that will help the quality of Mr. Brinkman's presentation. We all appreciate being able to hear Mr. Brinkman. We are also broadcasting this event on Facebook Live. So after we wrap up the event and the Q&A, give me a day or so, but I will send an email to everybody who is registered for this event. You'll get a link to a recording of tonight's event, and I will also include any resources that Bob mentions as part of his presentation. So if he mentions a book or provides some links, I will include that in the email I send out after tonight. It's always a struggle to try to hurry up and write things down while the presentation's happening. So we'll be sure to give that to you in an email. So the run of show for tonight is that when I get done with my intro, we'll hand it off to Mr. Brinkman and he'll go through his PowerPoint presentation, which is amazing. It is full of wonderful photographs of these painted churches of Texas. After that, we will have a trivia. This is something new we're trying tonight. We have 3 really cool little painted churches calendars that we'll be giving away. So we will have 3 trivia questions. The answers are going to be found in tonight's presentation, so try to pay attention. Hopefully you can catch the answers. And then after we do those 3 trivia questions, we'll move into a Q&A. And so the Q&A, we will kind of go by what questions have come up in the chat. So as the presentation is going, if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the chat channel. We'll answer those first come, first serve, as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. So I think that's all of my talking. It's now my privilege to introduce our presenter. As you may know, the Friends of the THC's motto is preserving the real places and the real stories of Texas. Tonight's event helps illuminate a part of our history that many people don't know much about. To help us learn, we are joined by Bob Brinkman. Bob joined the staff of the Texas Historical Commission in 2001. He is the coordinator for the Historical Markers Program. In his role, he has written 900 or so historical marker inscriptions. That's incredible. Bob graduated from Round Rock High School and earned degrees in cultural geography from the University of Texas and historic architecture from Texas A&M. He has been a member of several heritage groups and has presented papers at the Texas State Historical Association, East Texas Historical Association, and West Texas Historical Association conferences. Bob has also written sports, history, and travel articles for local newspapers and compiled the Arcadia Publishing Pictorial History of Round Rock. Bob, that's incredible credentials, and we're so glad to have you here tonight. It is all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Well, hello there, and thank you to the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission for hosting tonight, and thanks to all of you in the audience for joining in. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Okay. So we're going to start with a term called cultural geography, which is one of the two major branches of that field, along with physical geography. It is the study of cultural aspects found throughout the world, how they relate to the spaces and the places where they originate, and how they change or stay the same as people continually move across various areas. Studies in cultural geography help explain how and why people function as they do in the areas where they live. Professor Terry Jordan called Texas a confluence of cultures, with many different groups side by side, overlapping and mixing together. This map, developed by Dr. Jordan 50 years ago, shows many of these cultures scattered across the state, color-coded for different origins. One of the major boundaries shown is orange along the Rio Grande for predominantly Spanish surnames, and yellow in much of the rest of the map for settlement primarily from the southern states. Zooming in a little bit, you can see areas colored in khaki for Czech and magenta for German, two groups that we'll be focusing on in this presentation. Notice the large swath of German settlement connecting Seguin, New Braunfels, Fredericksburg, and Mason, with pockets of German and Czech heritage scattered between Dallas, Corpus Christi, and Houston. Cultural origins and influences can be found in place names, language, architecture, food, customs, faith, music, art, and material culture. Many predominantly Czech and German communities transplanted versions of their former hometowns to the New World, most notably in what are known today as the Painted Churches. Isolated examples of Czech immigration to the United States began as early as 1620, but it was not until the mid-1800s that they began to arrive in significant numbers. Ethnic Czechs, a Slavic people who lived in the provinces of Bohemia and Moravia, had endured over 200 years of Austrian rule when they rebelled in the revolutions of 1848. After political rebellion was unsuccessful, many Czechs lost hope of ever establishing a free state in their native land and began to look for opportunities in the New World. Many Czechs immigrated to America's larger cities, including New York, Chicago, and Cleveland. Rural Czechs gravitated toward the agricultural potential of places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and Texas. Czech and German settlement in Texas followed these broader trends, with a few pioneers arriving in the 1830s before immigration began in earnest in the 1850s due to political unrest and economic difficulties in Central Europe. We're going to look now at examples of painted churches in Texas, primarily some of the 15 which were researched and grouped together for a 1983 listing in the National Register of Historic Places. In Austin County, Czechs in the 1850s established a town originally named Vesely before being anglicized to Wesley. The Church of the Bohemian and Moravian Brethren built a 21 by 40-foot frame church in 1866, making it the oldest of the churches documented with decorative painting in Texas. The building was built with milled lumber that was hauled by cart from Galveston. When the building was lengthened at the front elevation in 1889, Reverend Bohuslav E. Lachiek began work painting the walls and ceiling. Over the entrance is the phrase, Ja jestem ta cesta I pravda I život, slova Jezice Christa. I am the way, the truth, and the life, the word of Jesus Christ. Painted interior features include painting on the frame walls in reddish brown with black borders to depict bricks, and also the appearance of columns and ceiling beams. On the wall behind the pulpit are Stars of David and the Czech phrase Bu es nami, meaning God with us, boldly lettered above a chalice. The ceiling is painted bright blue with a geometric border design. Tragically, Reverend Lachiek was shot and killed in a hunting accident. His painting remains untouched and incomplete, kept just the way he left it. On the ceiling, there are still tracings where he was going to continue his work. With a building erected by the congregation and later painted by the pastor rather than a professional artist, this is a unique entry among the painted churches. The building was designated a recorded Texas historic landmark in 1966 and listed in the National Register individually in 1979, and again with the group of 15 documented together in 1983. German settlers established Fredericksburg in 1846. A resident priest arrived in 1849 and established St. Mary's Parish. A stone church was built in 1861. This is now known as the Marian Kirk, and it still stands, seen on the right side of this photograph. Right next to it is a church designed by San Antonio architect Leo M.J. Dielman, completed in 1906. It's on the left of this photo, taken in 1906 as the new church was being dedicated. It is built of both rusticated and dressed limestone blocks, which was quarried nearby. Exterior features include a projecting polygonal apse and a corner tower rising above the roofline of the entrance. Buttresses, lancet doors, and trefoil and quatrefoil windows add to the Gothic Revival elements. Interior painting applied in 1906, 1908, and 1936 combines symbolic religious figures and geometric detailing. The painting is applied to the plastered walls and ceiling. Geometric banding accentuates the vaulting. There is a stenciled chair rail around the nave and entrance, done in brown, red, and blue-green, and accented with metallic gold. Above the apse is an enthroned Christ in Majesty figure, flanked with the Latin words, Ego sum panis vitae, I am the bread of life. The church organ, shown on the bottom right, also features pipes, which have been painted and stenciled. The German-American farming community of Lindsay, near Gainesville in North Texas, was founded in 1891 by Anton and William Fluschke, Catholic German immigrants who established successful communities in Iowa, Kansas, and Texas. The parish of St. Peter's was established in 1892, and after an earlier brick sanctuary was destroyed by a 1917 tornado, this impressive building was completed, utilizing bricks from the previous church. Dutch immigrant architect Frank E. Ludewig designed St. Peter's Catholic Church. The brick veneer church was completed in 1918 with the plan of a Latin cross and with a complex form characteristic of German Romanesque churches of the 11th and 12th centuries. Painted designs inspired by Byzantine architecture include striped courses of off-white and rusty brown, light beige blocks with stylized flowers, and geometric bands. Most of these designs were painted by German immigrant Fridolin Fox, who described himself on his World War I draft card as a church decorator. Some elements, including paintings of Saints Benedict and Boniface, were done by Dr. Matthias Zell, father of the church pastor in the 1910s. The building was designated a recorded Texas Historic Landmark in 1970, and St. Peter's Catholic Church was listed in the National Register in 1979 for its art and architecture, then included in the 1983 listing of multiple churches. The town of Shiner was established in 1887 upon the arrival of the San Antonio and Aransas Pass Railroad. Original Czech and German settlers attended Mass at churches in nearby communities until 1890, when 2 acres were purchased for a place of worship. Saints Cyril and Methodius Catholic Church was named for 2 8th century missionaries who spread Christianity in Bohemia. The growing congregation outgrew the original frame church, and so a larger red brick sanctuary was built in 1920. It was designed by San Antonio architect James Warrenberger in Romanesque Revival style, accented with pinnacles and buttresses. The interior painting was done by craftsman Edmund Fatio and includes Greek crosses, gold fleur-de-lis, and other stencil designs. A free-handed painting of angels on a blue background includes the Latin inscription Ecce Panis Angelorum, or Behold the Bread of Angels. A depiction of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is prominent, and other details include texturing and painting of the walls around the side windows to resemble stone arches. The church was also designated a recorded Texas Historic Landmark in 1990. Moravia is a settlement in Lavaca County, named for the Central European region that was the homeland for many Texas Czechs, with a different dialect from Standard Czech. Coming primarily from the northeast part of Moravia around the town of Larsko, they arrived in this area in the early 1870s. A settlement grew around the store of Ignaz Halufka and James Holub, and the village soon had a blacksmith shop, cotton gin, and school. In 1933, the population of Moravia was estimated at 40, which has since increased to about 200. In 1912 and 13, Ascension of Our Lord Catholic Church was built. Pastor Emil Schindler is credited with the design. The builder was Cook and Sons of Flatonia, and artist Donaker and Sons of San Antonio did the interior work in 1923. Elaborate decorative painting with a dominant blue and yellow gold color scheme embellishes the interior. The upper walls are painted to resemble dressed marble masonry in subtle shades of yellow, red, and green. The ceiling is vaulted in an unusual form, described as a variation of a basket arch in section. A 3-dimensional effect resembling plasterwork is achieved through highlight and shadow patterns. The ceiling includes freehand images of the ascension of Christ into heaven. This list is taken from the 1983 National Register listing of painted churches, or more correctly, churches with decorative interior painting in Texas. You can see there are examples across the state, from Amarillo to Paris to Galveston. In this presentation, we only have time to go into detail on about half of these, but at the end, we'll give you the link to explore the others, and in the follow-up email, you'll receive a link to watch this presentation again. Most of the remainder of the presentation will be spent on 4 examples of painted churches in communities in Fayette County, centered around LaGrange and Schulenburg. The area surrounds the historic La Bahia Road as it crosses the Colorado River and is marked by fertile agricultural land and rolling terrain. Most of the early settlers were from the Old South, but Stephen F. Austin's colony, which included this area, also included a few German immigrants. In 1832, Joseph Beagle received title to a league in the area and developed the first German community in the county, Beagle Settlement. In the 1840s, many more German immigrants settled in Fayette County. The Adelsverein, an association which organized larger-scale German immigration to Texas, purchased a league of land, more than 4,000 acres, in 1843, and established a plantation called Nassau Farm. During the mid-1850s, sizable numbers of Bohemian Czechs also began moving into the county. In 1856, the first Bohemian settlements in Texas were founded in Fayette County at Dubina and Hosteen. The tide of immigration was particularly strong in the 1880s, as numerous additional German and Bohemian settlers arrived. By 1890, nearly 1/4 of the county's residents, or about 7,800 of 31,000, were foreign-born, with the largest contingents coming from Germany with 3,600 and Austria-Hungary with 3,200. As a result, by the late 19th century, many of the leading businesses and civic organizations were dominated by Germans and Czechs. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, LaGrange had 2 foreign language newspapers, the Svoboda in Czech and the Zeitung in German. The Germans and Czechs formed shooting clubs, poetry clubs, and fraternal and religious organizations. The population of Fayette County reached an all-time high of 36,542 in 1900 and has stayed below that number to date. The largest communities are LaGrange, the county seat, Schulenburg, Flatonia, and Fayetteville. The community of Almondsville on Farm Road 1383, 9 miles southeast of LaGrange, was settled during the 1870s by German and Czech immigrant farmers on lands originally allotted to the Fayette County schools. The first settler in the community was Andrew Amann, who arrived on March 12, 1870. He was a noted architect as well as a farmer. In 1876, the first business opened, and by 1879, the town had a post office and a public school. In 1900, Almondsville had 3 stores and saloons, 2 blacksmith shops, 1 drugstore, 1 physician, and 2 cotton gins. The post office was discontinued in 1906. Mail was delivered from Weimar until the 1920s, and after that from Schulenburg. The public school closed in 1909. The first state bank of Almondsville was chartered in 1914, when the population of the extended community was estimated at 800, with 100 living in town. In the 1980s, fewer than 50 people lived in Almondsville. The Catholic Church, surrounded by a few remnant businesses, remains the focal point of community life. Area Catholics first worshipped at Hosteen and then in local homes. St. John the Baptist Catholic Church and a school opened in 1890 with Father Jules Verana as priest. The church was destroyed by a hurricane in 1909 and rebuilt and dedicated on November 24, 1910. Shortly thereafter, it was destroyed by fire and again rebuilt. Architect and builder John F. Bueno designed this Carpenter Gothic Revival style church, which was built in 1917 to 19 and stands out as the community's most significant building. The church is steeply gabled and has a tall spire above a bell tower marking the entrance. The original facade was later clad in artificial siding. While the outside appearance of St. John's is not unusual among similar historic churches across the state, its interior is distinctive for several reasons. Structurally, the ceiling is composed of an unusual combination of a high-pointed vault springing from 2 coved vaults. The church also contains decorative painting, which is more purely ornamental than any of the other churches we'll be covering. The inscription in Latin, Deliciae mea esse cum filius hominem, comes from Proverbs 8:31, where wisdom speaks of rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. The design incorporates stenciling, infill, freehand, and marbling techniques. The painting is executed with a simple color palette and is dominated by one hue, a warm pink, which is offset by woodwork painted white. The rectangular panels of the ceiling are further defined by floral and foliate frameworks skillfully executed in varying shades of pink and blue-green. Simple stenciled borders fill in the structural beams of the ceiling. The upper wall is decorated with a large-scale motif that includes circular and interwoven leaf elements set against a diagonal lattice. Other floral features include palm fronds and blossoms, including lilies. The pilasters along the walls are painted to give the appearance of marble. The artist and the date of these designs remains unknown, though it is believed to have been applied soon after the church was completed. The church remains the centerpiece of the community, whose population swells every Father's Day with a picnic that draws crowds in the thousands. In August 1856, a group of Czech settlers left Europe, departing from the port of Bremerhaven aboard a small ship called the Anna Elise. After enduring a difficult 14 weeks at sea, the immigrants arrived at Galveston and continued their journey inland. A ferry transported them up Buffalo Bayou to Houston, where they arranged for a 5-day trip by ox cart to Cat Spring. While many of the settlers rested there, a scouting party explored the area for favorable land, which they found in Fayette County. After arriving in LaGrange, the group separated into 2 smaller parties, one of which continued to the German town of Bluff and developed there what would become Hosteen. The other party contracted with 2 men, Charles and Joseph Brashear, for transportation by wagon to the undeveloped land south of LaGrange. Their journey ended at a clump of oak trees on the east bank of the Navidad River, where they were essentially left to their own devices. It was late November, and the settlers' first night would be a difficult one. A terrible sleet storm lasted through the night, from which their only shelter was the grove of oaks. They huddled together under the trees and built a large fire, but few slept, and many undoubtedly questioned their decision to come to America. The sky cleared the following morning, however, and the settlers were able to build a temporary shelter, beginning the development of a town known as Navidad, later renamed Dubina, which is the Czech word for oak grove. In 1877, a Catholic church, the first in Dubina, was built on land donated by Joseph Peter. Later, a school was built on land donated by Ignaz Mushny. In 1900, the church served a parish of more than 600 families. Dubina's social life revolved around the church, and a number of Catholic social organizations were established, including an 1887 lodge of Katolika Jednota Texaška, which translates as the Czech Catholic Union of Texas, a St. Anne's Society in 1889, and a 1900 society of Česko-Rimska Katolika Podporující Jednota Zen Texiskik, or the Czech Roman Catholic Aid Union of Women in Texas. In July 1909, a hurricane reached Dubina from the Gulf of Mexico, destroying the 1870s church. With the community thriving, however, plans for construction of a new Saints Cyril and Methodius began almost immediately. The church collected approximately $5,500 from insurance and the sale of lumber from the old church, and commissioned San Antonio architect Leo M.J. Dielman to design the new building. Local contractors Frank and Leo Bollman of Schulenburg oversaw construction, but oral history holds that most of the labor was provided by volunteer parishioners. It seems likely this was the fact, as the church was not completed until late in 1911. 3 pieces of the original building had survived and were incorporated into the new building. A chandelier was placed at the back of the church. The original bells were also reused, and a metal cross fabricated by Tom Lee was replaced atop the new church's spire. A choir loft spans the width of the building above the entry, with the altar at the far end of the sanctuary set back in the apse. The nave is divided into 3 vaulted sections. The ceiling is vaulted, although not a structural feature, coming to a point at its peak. The much narrower and shorter side sections are vaulted in the same way, separated from the central section by rows of columns supporting vaulted, pointed arches. Religious statuary is found throughout the church. A good deal of the statuary was brought over from Europe in the 1910s, as were the elaborately carved wood Stations of the Cross, with the text written in Czech. Like several other Texas churches built by Central European immigrants, St. Cyril and Methodius is adorned with an array of decorative interior painting. Colorful stenciled patterns of stylized vines and flowers trace the outline of the arches and windows, with geometric patterns also used along the outer walls. Unique paintings occupy prominent interior spaces, with angels above each column and an emblem of the parish in the central nave vault above the apse. All of the church's interior paintings were covered with solid white paint in 1952, but their existence was never forgotten, and faint traces remained visible. After more than 30 years, the church's parishioners decided to uncover and restore the paintings in 1983. Thus began a slow and steady restoration process, undertaken each Sunday after church services by the parishioners themselves. They carefully removed the white paint to reveal portions of the paintings. New stencils were made from each original pattern, and the freehand paintings were documented as thoroughly as possible. With the aid of historic photographs, church members then repainted all of the interior decorations in their original locations. And so, though the interior painting at Dubina was covered over when the statewide National Register listing was being prepared in 1983, in 2003, the Dubina Historic District, covering 19 acres and including the church, was listed in the National Register. And that brings us to a bonus story of historic architecture. We've mentioned that the 1909 hurricane destroyed the churches at Almondsville and Dubina, and that the congregation at Dubina used insurance and proceeds from lumber from the 1870s church to build their new church. Well, it turns out that the lumber was bought by a Ukrainian immigrant named Simon Petlovany. About a mile south of town in 1909, he used the 1870s lumber to build a new family home reminiscent of cottages in Ukraine. Its notable features include a steeply sloped roof, mud and straw chinking for insulation, and a distinctive oven. The Simon Petlovany House was listed in the National Register in 1975 for its unique architectural and cultural influences. High Hill is an old Fayette County town which predates nearby Schulenburg. In the late 1840s, German immigrants established two small settlements, Blum Hill and Oldenburg, and High Hill eventually grew out of them. Blum Hill was named for politician and publisher Robert Blum, who was executed for his role in the 1848 revolutions in Germany. Oldenburg was named for a German province. Early settlers in the area were German, Austrian, and Moravian. Henry Ebeling opened a store in Oldenburg in 1847, and John F. Hillier was operating a cotton gin and grist mill in the community by 1856. In 1860, the community was granted a post office with the name High Hill. Two private schools existed in the community. Mrs. August Richter directed the community dramatic players, and the Manor Choir and Orchestra were in great demand at the state Songerfests. In 1869, the community comprised 6 stores, 3 blacksmith and wheelwright shops, a hotel, and a brewery. When the railroad established nearby Schulenburg in the 1870s, many of High Hill's residents moved there. In 1900, the community reported a population of 134. The post office closed in 1907, and by 1940, High Hill had a population of 75, a church, a school, and 3 businesses. In 1861, a group of Catholics in the High Hill area, longing for church services, asked Reverend Victor Gorey of Frelsburg to visit their community occasionally. The first masses in the area were celebrated by Reverend Gorey in the log cabin of Andreas Bilemek and in the home of Franz Wick. Realizing the need for a proper place to worship, a permanent frame church named Nativity of Mary, Blessed Virgin, was eventually built by 36 families in 1869. The name of the church is now more commonly known as St. Mary's. The church was blessed on September 8, 1870. This building was eventually replaced by a second larger frame church in 1876. The red brick church, which still stands, was dedicated on September 8, 1906, and so the parish now celebrates the 2 church dedications every year on the first Sunday of September. In the summer of 1912, the interior of the church was decoratively painted by 2 very talented artists, Ferdinand Stockert and Herman Kern of San Antonio. The early church membership was predominantly German, as you can see by this marble cornerstone. It reads, Sie das Haus Gottes bei den Menschen, wird bei ihnen wohnen, Offenbarung 21:3. This is taken from Revelation 21:3. The tabernacle of God is with men, and he shall dwell with them. The Nativity of Mary, Blessed Virgin, or St. Mary's Church, is designed by San Antonio architect Leo M.J. Dielman and built by Frank Bollman of Schulenburg, and is the most prominent structure in this rural community. It was built of red brick laid on a concrete foundation, which is scored to resemble an ashlar water table. The modified rectangular plan features brick buttresses and a polygonal apse flanked by rectangular sacristies. A square tower with octagonal spire is sited at the front entrance. The slate roof is gabled, and 2 projecting gable wings mark both side entrances. The lancet windows range from simple narrow ones to broader windows with a configuration of stained lancet and circular windows. All of the window and door openings are accented with brick hood molds, keystones, and ashlar stone sills. The design incorporates some materials of the previous building, including 18 stained glass windows originally installed in the 1880s. The interior shows one of the most elaborate applications of decorative painting found in the state. This painting is rich in color and imagery. All of the ceilings, walls, and columns in the major spaces are extensively painted in many colors. These are primarily sky blue, off-white, green, and ochre. The nave is separated from two side aisles by octagonal columns painted to resemble marble and capped with Corinthian capitals highlighted with metallic gold. An elaborate system of groin vaulting provides the surface for the more profuse paintings. The vaults, molded diagonal ribs, and ridge bands are all outlined in metallic gold against a blue and off-white background. Framed by these bands are a combination of Greek and religious motifs, as well as those of the arts and crafts style. Flowering vines intertwine among the bands and along the floral and geometric borders. Spaced along the ceilings of the side aisles are stylized religious motifs. The spandrel above the apse is the focal point and features the Lamb of God set in a quatrefoil, flanked by kneeling angels against a backdrop of clouds. The extensively painted interior is unexpectedly elaborate and among the most sophisticated examples of such work in the state. Two San Antonio painters, Ferdinand Stockert and Herman Kern, executed the painting in 1912. The ceilings and walls combine freehand painting and stenciling in a variety of colors and patterns, while the wooden columns provide an excellent example of skillful marbling. High Hill underwent thorough repair and restoration work in 2011. Praha on Farm Road 1295, 3 miles east of Flatonia, was originally known as Mulberry. During the mid-1850s, a Bohemian immigrant named Matthias Novak came to the region. After working a short while, he saved enough money to buy 100 acres of land and build a house where early masses were celebrated. In 1858, the Bohemian settlers to this area changed the town's name to Praha in honor of Prague, the capital of their homeland. St. Mary's Church in Praha is among the oldest built painted churches, dating from 1895. San Antonio architect Otto Kramer was the designer, and a crowd in the thousands attended its dedication. Its exterior is uncommon, being built of rusticated sandstone ashlar blocks. The outside church walls were stuccoed in 1930, leaving sharply contrasting buttresses, hood molds, and window sills of exposed stone. At the front entrance, a square tower with an octagonal spire rises above the steep gabled roof. All window and door openings, with the exception of a wheel window among the main entrance, are narrow lancets of stained glass. The wooden doors have carved panels which resemble tracery. The church interior is adorned with an unusual and sophisticated combination of decorative paintings. They exhibit freehand work, stencil applications, and infilling. Dividing the space into nave and side aisles are octagonal columns exhibiting white marbling with metallic gold speckles. The ceiling, built of a network of wood frame vaults with pointed arches, is sheathed in beadboards painted to simulate the sky as a backdrop for the elaborate painting. A trompe-l'oeil effect, or trick of the eye, optical illusion, is produced by painted bands extending from the tops of the columns and pilasters up to the vaults. The appearance is of ribbed vaulting. Within each of the ribbed ceiling panels over the nave is a religious motif like a star or heart centered on a radiating yellow sunburst. Along the side aisles above column height, depictions of plant life, possibly representing paradise, seem to spill over the cornice. Freehand flora and fauna are depicted in hues of greens and blues among rose, white, and yellow blossoms. Although the kinds of plants are repeated, no two plant forms are identical. On the back wall of the apse, also above column height, is a mural of 3 winged angels, each wearing a robe of a different color. The figures are portrayed with a large Latin cross in a traditional lamentation pose. At the base of the mural are 2 faint churches, both of which exist in Prague, Czech Republic, painted a slightly darker blue than the background. The beautiful interior of the present structure was painted soon after the building was completed and retained its original appearance and integrity. The skillful use of freehand trompe-l'oeil techniques with plant and architectural forms is rare. The artist who did the ceiling work was Godfrey Fleury, a native of Switzerland. In Texas, he became known as a painter of church murals and frescoes. St. Mary's is one of the very few structures still standing that display his work. St. Mary's Church of the Assumption in Praha is important because of its exterior construction in Gothic Revival style and because of its unusual and skillful interior painting. Established in 1855 by Czech settlers, St. Mary's was the first Roman Catholic church between San Antonio and Houston. Since then, it has played a major role in the social and cultural life of the area. Every August 15, a celebration is held of the Feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary called Praska Paut, or Homecoming. It should be noted that the churches at Almondsville, Dubina, High Hill, and Praha each have a cemetery associated with them, either immediately adjacent to the church or just across the road. Many of the gravestones and historic gates and entrances feature Czech and German language inscriptions, such as the gate of the Praha Cemetery shown here. You may also know Praha for its distinction in World War II. Buried in the cemetery behind the church and memorialized on the grounds with 3 stone chapels are 9 casualties of World War II who died in the space of 12 months from this community whose entire population at the time was only in the dozens. And now here's a little more biographical information about some of the more important architects and artists associated with the painted churches. Leo Maria Joseph Dielman was born in San Antonio in 1881. He graduated from St. Mary's College in 1898 and later studied architecture and engineering in Germany. He was appointed City Building Inspector of San Antonio in 1909 and held this position for 3 years. For the first 5 decades of the 20th century, he devoted himself entirely to architecture. Among the structures he designed are the Fort Sam Houston Post Chapel, buildings at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, and numerous churches, schools, civic buildings, and residences throughout Texas. Dielman was prolific as a church architect, designing hundreds of buildings across the state, primarily in Central and South Texas for the Catholic Church. Included in those are St. Mary's Catholic Church in Fredericksburg and Nativity of Mary Blessed Virgin Church at High Hill. Dielman was a member of the Texas Society of Architects and of the Board of Trustees of the San Antonio Public Library, president of the Harmonia Lodge of the Sons of Herman in Texas, and on the committee for the Home for the Aged of the Sons of Herman at Comfort. James Warrenberger was born in Austin in 1855. After completing school in Pennsylvania, he went to Switzerland in 1872 to study mathematics, and then to Germany to study architecture. In 1878, he returned to Austin and opened an architectural practice, later moving to San Antonio. He was among the first Texas architects to have a professional degree. He designed many residences, commercials, and institutional buildings. Warrenberger drew up the first building ordinance for San Antonio and served as the city's first building inspector for 4 years. He designed St. Cyril and Methodius Church in Shiner, among many other church designs. Gottfried or Godfrey Fleury, decorative painter and commercial artist, was born in Switzerland in 1864. At age 16, he immigrated to the United States with his family. He found work in New York City as a painter and decorator and stayed in the U.S. when his family returned to Switzerland. He moved to Buffalo and later to Kansas City, where he established himself as a decorator. In 1891, he and his family moved to San Antonio. In 1892, he moved to Moulton, where he painted the interiors and exteriors of homes and churches. In 1895, he was commissioned to paint the interior of St. Mary's Church at Praha, a work that proved to be the most important of his career. The church was a great success and won him many other commissions, notably one to paint the pressed steel ceilings of the Lavaca County Courthouse, which have since been repainted. Sketches indicate that he also painted church interiors of St. John's near Schulenburg and Czestochowa, as well as homes in Flatonia. Preservationist interior designer and educator of Bowie Harwood focused her research on decorative applications in Texas on 5 techniques, and each of these 5 are present among the 15 painted churches. The first process is called stenciling. This is characterized by small-scale repeated patterns of flat color, often with geometric or stylized plant designs. This example is from Almondsville. And here is another example of stenciling from Dubina. Freehand painting reflects individual designs rather than repetition, and these are usually representations of figures or events. Examples include the angels and descending dove of the Holy Spirit on the ceiling of St. Mary's Church near Hallettsville in Lavaca County. Another freehand example is found in the figures on the apse spandrel in Queen of Peace Catholic Church in Sweet Home, also in Lavaca County. Infill painting involves large repeating patterns and utilizes a preliminary outline of a design transferred to a surface to be painted, with the outlined areas then filled in. Infill painting involves shading more often than in stencil painting. Examples of infill include the ceiling patterns at Almondsville, shown here. Here is another example of infill painting in the medallion pattern at Moravia. The remaining 2 painting types are examples of trompe-l'oeil or fool the eye techniques, which create optical illusions. Graining is a method which gives the appearance of higher quality wood finishes, such as making pine or cedar furniture or fixtures seem to look like finer grains like mahogany or rosewood. The pews at St. Joseph's Church in Galveston, pictured here, are the only example of graining found among the 15 churches listed in the National Register in 1983. Marbling gives a similar effect, imitating the surface of marble with stripes and brush techniques on wood. Columns and pilasters are often embellished with marbling, such as this example at Almondsville. And marbling was used on the walls of Our Lord of the Ascension Church in Moravia in a different way, to imitate dressed blocks of stone. Well, hopefully these images and this information has inspired you to see some of these sites and others for yourself. One great way to plan a trip is through the website texastimetravel.com. You can go to that web address or scan the QR code on your screen with your phone now. Texas Time Travel is sponsored by the Texas Heritage Trails Program, which is the Texas Historical Commission's award-winning heritage tourism initiative. This economic development initiative encourages communities, heritage regions, and the state to partner and promote Texas's historic and cultural resources. On the Texas Time Travel website, you can plan an itinerary and save your favorites, watch videos, translate materials, and explore different regions of Texas. You might also want to join 40,000 or so subscribers of the Texas Heritage Traveler newsletter, which you can sign up for by scanning the QR code on the screen or by going to the Texas Historical Commission website at thc.texas.gov. You can subscribe to a quarterly e-newsletter with great travel stories, and there's even an archive so you can catch up on ideas across the state or closer to your neck of the woods. On this slide, we have a link to the entire National Register nomination on painted churches on the first link there, which you can download. Also listed are books for additional reading and reference. We've covered a lot in this presentation, but it's time to wrap it up. If we didn't spend enough time on your favorite or mention it at all, we encourage you to download the National Register file at the link shown here or contact us at history@thc.texas.gov, the email at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get that information to you. For any churches or communities which have historical markers, we can also send you copies of any history and photos that are in those files. We also hope you'll make plans to visit these painted churches and these communities in person, and that you'll let us know of any history, architecture, or artwork that we should know about at the Texas Historical Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bob. That was incredible. Thank you so much. And For all of you who are hurrying to write down these, the names of these books and authors and email addresses, don't worry. I'm going to put all of this into an email, which I will send to everybody who's here tonight, all the registered participants. So I know it's hard to scribble down all the information that you want to have. So we will definitely send that to you at the email address that you use to register. And if there's a better email address, you just need to let me know. I will put my contact information in the chat here in just a minute. So I think what we'll do now is do our quick trivia, because as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a couple of these wonderful painted churches calendars to give away tonight. We have 3. And I'm going to go off script from Bob just a little bit because I started to worry that the questions we had might be a little bit too hard. So I have 1 hard one and 2 easier ones that we're going to do. So I'm going to say the question, and then the first person who puts the right answer in the chat will get the calendar. Sound good? Fingers ready? Okay, first question. What 1909 event destroyed 2 of the painted churches? 1909 event. Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay, so if I am looking correctly, it looks like Donna Snow got the first answer there. All right, Donna. Look at all of you paying attention. This is great. Back in my teaching days, I would have been very proud of you all. All right, let's go for one more easy one and then we'll hit the hard one. Ready? The town of Praha was named for what large city in the Czech Republic? All right, they go so fast, I can't keep up with which one was the first. DVA. Okay, well, those were too easy, I think. All right, let's try a hard one. So this is the last question for the calendar. And you folks who are winning these, I just need to get an email address from you so that I can get a mailing address. So I will put my email address in the chat when we're done with the next question. And I just need you to send me a good email address where, or a good mailing address where I can send your calendar. Okay, last question. Ready? What painted church features the unfinished work of its own pastor who died in a hunting accident in 1891? Yeah, that is the answer. Lori, you got the answer. Great job, everybody. That was fun. It's the first time we've had a trivia, so I didn't know how it was going to go. So it seemed like it went pretty well. Yes, the correct answer was the Wesley Brethren Church. Okay, moving on to the Q&A now. We had a lot of questions in the chat. Let me get back up to the top here. We are also live streaming to Facebook, so we have a few questions that came in through that channel as well, which Anjali is helping us with. Thank you so much, Anjali. And our first question tonight is, could Bob please spell the name of the architect John F? I think you did. Did you go through all the architects, including that one? John F and the last name Guinno. I can't turn your mic on.
Which architect was it?
John F. Guinno. Guinno. The person is not certain they're spelling it right.
Right.
I
This is
got
on Facebook Live. Yeah.
Okay, you got it.
It's Almondsville. It's John F. Bujnoch, and I said
Buj. Okay.
Bujnoch.
Okay.
And I said Bueno because that's how my high school principal pronounced it, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad we asked that question then, because I think we were all way off. I always thought that was spelled. All right. Another question from Facebook Live, was there collaboration between designers and or community members in regard to designing and building a church?
I think so. I mentioned author Bowie Harwood, who helped with this research for the National Register, and I asked her that question about if these communities were aware of each other's work and these interiors, and they kind of preliminary done some of that 40 years ago. Like we said, for Godfrey Fleury, this is the only of his work that survives, and so there's not a lot of correspondence or records of exactly which projects a lot of them worked on. It's usually easier to find architects' records than interior work, so I think we still don't know as much as we want to about how they influenced each other.
All right, thank you. We have a question from Cherie. Are most of the Texas painted churches painted on wood or plaster?
I think it's mostly wood, but if Robert Marshall is still with us, he can give some detail about the materials.
It's a combination, depends on the church. If you're talking, let's say, St. Mary's in High Hill, that was on plaster. And then up above, it's canvas on wood.
Right, exactly.
So you have a lot of, and also all of the metallic, the metals that like pretty much most of them are all in gold now. There were times where they had been painted over, but most of everything is done in literally 23 karat gold now.
Yeah, exactly.
For those who joined us after I introduced Robert, Robert did restoration on several of the buildings that we covered tonight. So he is a source of wisdom and knowledge about the restoration. Okay, another question. Were these churches typical of the churches in their home countries?
I haven't matched them all up, but I think a lot of them were modeled after particular churches from where they came, or at least a representation of them, if not an exact detail.
Another question, for the restoration of Saint Cyril Catholic Church, did the community members get guidance, help from any preservation organization?
I think Robert might know something about that for Dobina.
Mostly it was Judge Janechka, who was the authority over that. And like that, and in many of the churches, the pastors and then the elders of the church were very instrumental in what was happening inside their churches. But anyway, they were like, for instance, it was at the time Judge Ed of Fayette County contacted me and had me look at his church, and we discussed what was there and how to clean up the ceiling and put it back the way it had been. He was confident in his parishioners helping him do a lot of the artwork that was down low, but once it started getting up high, he wanted our team to come in there with scaffold and actually take care of it. Plus, another thing is they weren't very good with the idea of metal leaf and gold, etc. So that's when we came in, and that was back in 2004. Okay. And at the same time, we were doing the courthouse in LaGrange.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the delay. I was trying to put my email address in the chat for the folks who won the trivia. Okay, I know we have another couple of questions here. Yes, another question from Facebook Live. Did Dobina and High Hill have a role in the construction of the old piano bridge that connects the two churches?
Yes, and the best source for that is the book I just got, written by Ed and Margie Janechka, about Dobina history. There's a whole section in there on the piano bridge.
Judge Ed knows all there is to know.
Hang on a second. There you go. That's on the list of books. It's Dobina, A Place of Freedom and Hope by Ed and Margie Janechka, brand new.
Get that. It's funny is a lot of those bridges were sold in kits where you had somebody who was actually helping to put it together, and then the parts were cast in other places and then brought, because of course they didn't cast the steel, the iron and steel right there in Fayette County. They of course brought it in from somewhere else.
We have a question in the chat from Rachel. Rachel, I'm going to suggest that that's a really good question to email us about. So if you don't mind going ahead and emailing that the question about access and traveling and making sure that there's accommodations when traveling, that's a great question, and I will put you in touch with the proper person who can answer that in more detail for you. So feel free to email me at the email address that I put in the chat, christy.peliquin@thc.texas.gov, and I will put you in touch with the right person. Okay, are there any other questions? We still have plenty of time for questions, so please do let us know. You can put it in the chat, or if you're feeling comfortable and unmuting yourself and asking a question, you can do that too. I want to let you know that if you liked tonight's presentation, we are going to have a follow-up Painted Churches of Texas Part 2. We had a remarkable amount of interest in this topic, and so we invite you back. I think we're going to do Part 2 on, let me check my records, July, not January, July 27th, this summer. So mark your calendars, July 27th. We will do a Part 2, which I think will be digging a little bit more into restoration and talking hopefully with a couple of folks who assisted with getting these properties on the register, and whatever else we can dream up to put together for you all on this topic. So any Christy, other questions though? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add that we have a full calendar of these virtual events. Every month we'll have at least one event, if not more, which Christy organizes. All of this information is on our website at thcfriends.org. If it's not up yet, the July event will be up pretty soon. And so please visit our website and register for these events. We'll keep track of who's registering and make sure that you get all the contact information for the Zoom meetings in time for you to join us. So please keep an eye on our events page on our website.
I know there's more questions. We have time, so don't be shy.
Christy, there's a question from Facebook Live. I'm just going to ask it instead of dropping it in the chat. This is from Lynn Dean, who asks, if I remember correctly, the churches seem to represent German, Czech, Swiss, and a few other groups. Was there a common inspiration?
Robert, do you have any thought of that?
I would have to say worshiping God. Basically, that their belief in the Catholic religion. There are a few churches that are Lutheran and other, but basically it was their strong belief in Catholicism and taking their beliefs and their knowledge of the churches that they had in Europe and bringing it to their new locations.
Yeah.
Their inspiration was obviously from all of the different churches I've worked on: Mary, Jesus, the saints, numerous saints. You had different societies named after Joseph and Anne, Saint Joseph and Saint Anne, and many others. Yeah. Judge Ed would be somebody that would be very knowledgeable about all this too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there's another question. I'm sorry.
That's just okay. You go yours first.
There's another question from Sue Kirkpatrick on Facebook Live. She asks, well, let's see, the question disappeared. I think her question was, in addition to German, Czech, and Swiss churches, were these churches found with, amongst other communities as well? Were there other communities who did similar work?
I think there are examples of Polish Texan churches that also have painting. I mean, that list of 15 was the ones they found in the 80s. There are others not even on that list. And then other churches may have smaller scale artwork that's not the entire church, but is certainly historic artwork of 100 years ago. This is without even getting into the statues, the paintings, the Stations of the Cross, and all sorts of other historic elements to churches that doesn't fit in this program.
And Lynn actually asks a follow-up question to your answer, Robert, which was, she was wondering if this was a unique Texas expression of church architecture and decoration, or is it, do we see this kind of stuff outside of Texas as well?
There are a lot of different decorative churches that employ a lot of these different styles outside of Texas, all over the country. But it has to be said that these churches are unique in that they have wooden structures. They were made usually by local craftsmen. They either brought in artists or they decorated themselves. It's quite unique to have that much decoration in a small, simple, poor church. Most of them weren't very rich. Exceptions to that rule would be High Hill. They apparently had money. That typically you can see it in the stained glass. If they have ornate stained glass like they'd have in High Hill, you know that the church had money. And High Hill got its money mainly from very good crops of cotton for a few years from that area. Now, some of the parishioners had been involved in the oil business, so they continued to maintain and care for their church very well.
Thank you.
We have many more questions in the chat over here. So if the Facebook Live is done, Anjali, I'll move on to these. Okay. Okay, I'm going to mispronounce this. I'm so sorry ahead of time. Fritz and Marta, this is your question. Are you aware of the fire to the church in
Hosting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, that is sad because we know about that, definitely. That's Hosting is a sister city of Dubina's early Czech settlement.
And then I noticed, Donna Snow says, I noticed that the majority of paint colors were muted blues, pinks, and olives. Is that because the dyes came from local plants?
I defer to Robert on that.
Most of the paints were made with pigmented earth.
Okay.
Fascinating. And Joan asks, were Polish settlers included with the Czech?
Not in this presentation. I know there are Polish churches. Well, there was the reference to Częstochowa as one of the ones that Godfrey Fleury worked on. And I believe Panna Maria's church is painted. So there are some in the Polish area a little bit east of San Antonio.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, so Kristen asks, how widely, geographically speaking, did the Texas artists work? Did they go as far as places like Indiana or Pennsylvania? Was it common that they worked across denominations?
I would like to know more about that. I've just pulled a little bit of a biography together about these artists so far. Even just getting their names spelled right inconsistently, but that doesn't seem to even be true within their lifetime. So that's why we have Gottfried or Godfrey Fleury. And Friedel Fox is also Frederick Fox sometimes.
One of the problems you'll have with this type of industry is the fact that you get a contract. Let's say you have a decorative job to do, and you'll be working there for a year, and it's miles from your home. So a lot of times you move to the new location and work there, and then you get your next job, and you move to that new location.
Yeah.
So it's a hard business to be in, but you have to take what you can get. So even I have businesses in multiple states where we work on a lot of different state capitals and churches and what have you from those locations. So these people in history, throughout history, didn't have the type of ease of transportation that we have now.
Yeah.
So you can imagine they'd have to work somewhere where they could catch a train, or a donkey, and go to their job.
Yep.
All right. Karen asks, most of the painted churches seem to have roots in the Eastern Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox tradition. Oh, it's not a question. I'm sorry. It's a comment. Sorry about that, Karen. But Margaret does have a question. Hers is there a painted church in Paris, Texas?
Yes, the Paris Baptist Church, I believe, is one of these 15 from 1983. And if she wants to send us an email at history@texas.gov, we can send her just the Paris section of that nomination.
Excellent.
And it's better to say that those churches were all of that had the Cyrillic alphabet involved in their name. They weren't necessarily Eastern European or Greek, but they did have the Cyrillic alphabet involved. And that would be most of the Bohemian Czech. The German, that they were staunchly Roman Catholic.
Yep.
And so were the Czech, but they had Cyrillic roots or Moravian roots. Or large groups of Moravians in Pennsylvania as well as in Texas.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, that actually is the end of the questions that we have here. Anjali, any more questions over on Facebook Live?
No.
Okay.
None.
Well, I invite you all to please join us for our future virtual events. We have several lined up now, including some that we haven't even put up on our website yet, but I can give you a brief idea if you're interested. We have coming up in April, Mr. Brian Schroeder. He's the director of the Center for Big Bend Studies at Sul-Ross University. He'll be giving us an update on Big Bend archaeological studies that are going on there. And then in May, we will have David Laughlin. He is an assistant professor in plant pathology at Texas A&M Kingsville. He's going to talk to us about the history of the grapefruit in Texas. You might be familiar with the ruby red and the Rio grapefruit. Well, he's going to talk to us about that. And then we are hoping to have a presenter from the Plains, I always get this wrong, Panhandle Plains Museum, and she will give us a presentation on how women saved the West. Very interesting about the role of women in preserving artifacts. And then, as I mentioned before, we're hoping to have our Part 2 Painted Churches event on July 27th. So you can find out about all of these on our website. As we are posting things, you'll see the registration link. Sometimes we're still collecting information, so bear with us as we takes us a minute to find all the right information to put up there for the registration link. But I know for sure that already we have the problem of slavery in Mexican Texas posted. So if you are interested in that topic, please go ahead and register. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's such a wonderful community that we have that come to these events, and we're grateful for you. So see you next time.
Okay.